Greetings. I'm Sando Ojiambo, the CEO and Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact, the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. I'm pleased to welcome you today to the UN Global Compact Academy, our online learning platform for corporate sustainability professionals. We have organized this special session of the Academy in partnership with UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. This session will focus on developing and implementing family-friendly policies in the workplace. By joining us, you will learn how various companies and experts are tackling a critical question: how can businesses best support working parents? Around the world, working parents lack the resources they need to keep their families safe and secure. These are resources such as quality healthcare and paid sick leave, paid parental leave, living wages that cover family costs, child benefits, and access to affordable childcare. And now, COVID-19 poses even greater challenges for parents who must juggle the roles of worker, caregiver, provider, and teacher. Women are affected most acutely of all, as they bear an uneven burden of responsibility for child and elder care. At the same time, essential workers and those with jobs that cannot be done remotely are struggling to find viable childcare options. In these ways and more, the public health and economic crises triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic are shining a spotlight on the vital importance of family-friendly policies. In response, the UN Global Compact and UNICEF have produced a new guide designed to help employers support parents and caregivers in their own business operations. The guide also calls on employers to promote family-friendly policies among their business partners and across their supply chains. We developed this handbook as part of the Decent Work in Global Supply Chains Action Platform, an alliance of companies launched by the UN Global Compact in 2017. Partners include UNICEF, the International Labour Organization, and the Global Deal Initiative. After this session, please take the opportunity to learn about the platform and the steps your company can take to engage with its work. You can also learn more about Target Gender Equality, the UN Global Compact Accelerator Program for women's empowerment in businesses worldwide. Right now, however, I would like to hand it over to the Executive Director of UNICEF, Henrietta Fore. Thank you all very much for your participation.
Thank you, Sanda. On behalf of everyone at UNICEF, thank you to the organizers, speakers, and panelists for shining a light on this critical issue. We are proud to join our friends of the UN Global Compact in this important event. A year and a half ago, in July 2019, we marked the launch of the Family-Friendly Policies Agenda with a bold call to action to redesign the workplace of the future. In many ways, the future we envisioned then now stands before us. COVID-19 triggered an urgent reimagining of the workplace. The social and economic toll of the pandemic is unprecedented, and one that threatens to unravel many of the gains that we've made in areas like child health and nutrition, poverty eradication, gender equality, and inclusive economic growth. But this is not only a crisis for children. It's also a crisis for the most marginalized, including workers and their families in low-income, informal, and precarious employment. Now, more than ever, these workers and their families need support. We've seen the possibilities. We've seen that providing inclusive paid parental leave, breastfeeding support, access to quality childcare, adequate wages, and government-sponsored child benefits, we can create a win-win situation for children, women, parents, businesses, and society. Our job now is to translate these possibilities into lasting and inclusive family-friendly policies, especially as economies recover and regather strength in the years ahead. In this great effort, we need governments, but we also need the private sector to support their employees, workers, and business partners through the recovery and beyond. While the call to action has not changed, its urgency has. This unprecedented moment calls on all of us to take unprecedented action. That's what this meeting is all about, discussing the ideas and solutions that will make family-friendly policies a reality for every worker, every parent, and every child. Thank you for joining UNICEF and the UN Global Compact in this important initiative.
Thank you so much to Henrietta Thor, and thank you to Sanda Ojambo for those powerful words and for setting the scene for this UN Global Compact Academy learning event on family-friendly policies. And a very warm welcome to all of you. It's a real pleasure to be here with you this sunny morning from Bangkok. My name is Ida Hillestead, and I'm the Regional Child Rights and Business Manager covering East Asia Pacific at UNICEF. I am very pleased to welcome so many of you to this webinar. Today, you'll be hearing about the importance of family-friendly policies, a topic that has only gained more importance and relevance in the context of COVID-19, and which is critical as part of reimagining and redesigning the workplace of a post-pandemic future. We're very pleased to have a number of speakers with us today, including Gayatri Ramamurthy from Capgemini India, Amy Lurinstra from the International Finance Corporation, as well as Laura Adati from the ILO. Now, before I hand over to the ILO, we want to start with a brief introduction to what we mean by family-friendly policies. In essence, family-friendly policies are the policies and benefits that help workers reconcile work and family life. At UNICEF, we categorize family-friendly policies into 3 support dimensions. The first one is time, and here we refer to shared and paid parental leave, but also to paid family and sick leave, to breastfeeding support, for example, paid breastfeeding breaks during working hours, and to flexible work arrangements. Of course, this has been something that has been particularly pertinent in the context of COVID-19, in times when school and offices has been closed. The second is resources, being living wages that cover family costs, child benefits, especially in low-wage employment situations. And third are services. For example, employer-supported access to affordable quality childcare or information. For example, positive parenting sessions, providing guidance on early childhood development, the nutritional needs of children, and so forth. But these aspects are not only critical for women, fathers, parents, and caregivers, but also for children. During the first 1,000 days of a child's life, parents have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build a baby's brain and to shape a child's ability to learn and flourish. As their children grow, fathers, mothers, and caregivers continue to have the most important job in the world, that is building the foundations for life in the future. There is a wealth of evidence showing how shared parental leave, childcare, and breastfeeding support in the workplace translate into positive outcomes for children, as well as the parents and businesses themselves. Family-friendly policy measures can literally save lives, increase health and well-being, and reduce healthcare costs and absenteeism. Today, I'm sure we'll hear much more about these business benefits. For example, how such policies help businesses attract and retain a talented, skilled, and diverse workforce. And if you want to learn more about these aspects and the benefits, we encourage you to access the publication we released with UN Global Compact in November last year, as well as UNICEF's Handbook for Business on how to implement family-friendly policies, also published last year. The link to both of these and other resources will be posted in the chat box as part of this webinar. But now, without further ado, I'm really pleased to hand over to Laura Adati from the ILO.
Thank you, and I'm very glad to be here today again to share the ILO perspective on family-friendly policies. As we heard, this topic has never been more important than today, and investing in care should really be at the heart of building a better normal, as the ILO Director General has put it. So I would like to briefly talk about why investing in care is important, what can be done, we've heard a little bit about that, and how. Balancing paid work and care for our loved ones, we heard is not a new challenge, especially for women. Before COVID, women were already performing more than 3/4 of all unpaid care work globally. And as a result, there were experiences, what we call at the ILO, a number of motherhood penalties in employment, in pay, in leadership, in the world of work. But the current crisis is really bringing unprecedented challenges in terms of work-life balance that is affecting children, parents, but also businesses and societies. We heard that it's so exciting that many of you are already doing something, but the current policies really are not doing a good job for the large majority of workers. We can do more. And this is why, more than ever, government, businesses, and workers need to come together and invest in care. So why this is so important? Because care matters to all of us, matters to workers, businesses, and families, but it remains invisible, unvalued, and unaccounted for in decision-making. And this is why the ILO Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work has put measures to balance care and work, but also investing in the care economy at the heart of a transformative agenda for gender equality. Governments, employers, and workers have also adopted a number of international labor standards that provide guidance on how to design effective family-friendly policies, both public policies and corporate policies. So what can be done that is so important and crucial to be a game changer? We can adopt maternity protection in line to ILO conventions and beyond, including maternal and child health care, support for breastfeeding, non-discrimination, well-paid family leave for all carers and all family types, quality childcare and other care services with good working conditions and pay for care workers. This is so important during the current pandemic. Return to work programs to help leave takers to smooth back into the workplace, and family-friendly working arrangement with an accent on decent working time and the right to disconnect, as many workers are increasingly relying on new technologies and telework. So how can this policy be made really transformative so they work for all, which means guaranteeing at the same time the well-being, the rights and agency of all parties, but also the productivity and sustainability of businesses. So I would like to focus on 4 key points. The first is listen and consult workers, support social dialogue and collaboration that enables workers and employers and their representatives to agree on innovative solutions. They really fit their context, but also consider their respective needs and benefits. Second, think about the power of leadership and culture. Support care as a normal fact of business life and role model work-life balance so workers feel more comfortable about using the current measures. This makes such a difference. Third, design these policies and implement them with the explicit objective of breaking gender stereotypes and enabling the sharing the care between women and men. Ensure that these policies cover all workers and encourage the take-up, especially by men and those that are most likely to be left behind. For instance, workers with precarious contracts in supply chain, in the informal economy. Think about the most vulnerable that benefit the most. And finally, become a champion of transformative policies. While governments can and have a leading role in this topic, companies can make a difference in many ways. Complying with national legislation, adopting corporate policies that are in line or go over and above international labor standards, call for the ratification and implementation of ILO Convention, support a strong fiscal space to sustain social protection systems so we can achieve universal coverage. Measure, monitor, and report success, what works, so we can learn from each other as we're doing today. And I would like to conclude on a key point about affordability. This question comes over and over. We have heard about it this morning. Think that there are a lot of low cost, of zero cost measures that even employers with limited resources can offer to support, like in small and medium-sized enterprises. Let's just think about how empathy can help, because really right now, as we are all in the deep of this emotional and mental strain, and here I speak as a working parent too, we really cannot afford not to care about care. Thank you very much, and over to you, Ida.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you for helping us set the scene for the next part of the webinar. And I think it's so important that we now look at how do we translate these standards and guidance into practice. And to help us answer this, we have with us today Gayatri Ramamurthy, who is the Senior Director and Lead for Diversity and Inclusion at Capgemini India, and Amy Lurinstra, the East Asia Pacific Lead, Gender and Economic Inclusion at IFC. Thank you both for joining us. It is a pleasure to have you here with us. But let's begin with the basics. I'd like to start with you, Gayatri. Capgemini India has a range of policies and programs in place to support the working parents. Can you tell us briefly about Capgemini, but also what journey your company has been on in terms of family-friendly policies, what policies you have in place, and what's motivated you to adopt these policies? Over to you, Gayatri.
Thank you, Ida. Capgemini is a global leader in consulting, digital transformation, technology, engineering services. So we are a responsible multicultural company with about 270,000 people in about 50 countries. Our purpose really is to unleash human energy through technology to ensure that we build an inclusive and sustainable future. We have about 125,000 employees in India across 12 locations. So that's to give you a context on Capgemini. I think the question on family-friendly policies. The most important resource for us is talent. So it's absolutely critical that we ensure our talent feels engaged and motivated to deliver. We started with parental policies. We have the 6-month maternity leave, and we add an additional month over and beyond because we realized that the initial phase of the child with the parent is so important, especially the mother. And we have about 26 weeks adoption leave, 6 months surrogacy leave, and 1 week paternity leave. So we started with leaves because policies are very important. And you don't translate policies if you don't have the best practices in place. Fair welcome is farewell welcome. So it's our return to work, especially from long leave and particularly from maternity. So we have a Maternity Connect program where we kind of educate and equip the woman before she takes her 6-7 month break and provide the necessary support for her to stay connected, including laptop and whatever else is required for her to be from home. The process of education continues. We have parental webinars, and the webinar is not limited to women because it's absolutely unfortunate when we think that a family, the responsibility of initial caregiving is only the mothers. So we also equip our male employees to understand the commitment and responsibility towards building that family. Upskilling continues during this, break because they need to stay connected and they also enjoy those conversations with their buddies. So we have buddies assigned during the break. Of course, it's not very contextual at this point because 97% of our workforce in India are working from home. But we have infrastructure with creche and we have top-line creche facilities in almost all the locations that we are from, especially the very dense locations, and lactation rooms. The employee, the woman has the right to step out of her workspace and go visit the child 5 times through her 9 hours at work. And this is absolutely mandatory. What we realized over a period of the past maybe couple of years, increasing number of women reason out returning to work as the reason for not nursing. And that's extremely unfortunate. And we didn't want that to continue. It's very, very important both for the child and for the mother to continue nursing and breastfeeding. So for us, our commitment through lactation rooms and education on the purpose and intent behind breastfeeding continues. We have a parental ERG, and again, it's not limited to women. And this networking forum is necessary just for buddies and colleagues to have non-judgmental conversations. We also, during COVID times, had inclusive parenting sessions. And the intent of these sessions was to engage with the child and the parent. So we had probably about 20% fathers, and predominantly they were 80% of them were women. But they bring in their child, and we have some fun and learning sessions through them. Of course, bereavement leave, which is very essential, and flexibility. I mean, it can't be more contextual than it is today, Ida, in terms of reduced work hours, part-time, and leave like half-day surrogacy. The long-term break that we give. How can I forget the name? So it's basically a 6-month break from work because sabbatical, because you would like to study or you would like to pursue something different. I guess, yeah. Did I answer all your questions, Ida?
You did. It's such an impressive range of family-friendly policies you have in place, and I take note of us. Oh, I love the commitment to engage your male employees and make sure that they also feel fully committed to this, to becoming a parent and what that means in terms of their time. I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about what motivated Capgemini to introduce all these family-friendly policies, some of which go beyond compliance and what the government has put in place in terms of legislation.
As I told you, talent is our primary, resource. We work with talent. And if your people are not engaged with you, they don't feel connected with the organization, especially during COVID times where we have not had social connects in person as we are so used to having, how can we expect innovation? How can we expect that they would deliver for the client? So employee engagement, to me, is a business case. And FFPs, family-friendly practices, are absolutely key and centric to my emotional connect and belongingness to the organization. As an organization, we're gender inclusive. So it's also necessary that we position ourselves in the market, in the talent market, and in the environment around us, to our clients, to all our stakeholders, as an inclusive organization. And you can't take a stance like that unless you deliver to your talent. So I don't think there's even a rationale on the business case. It's very clear that it leads to better performance and productivity. I think what is probably needed by all of us together is to educate, corporate world.
I think it's really clear. You're really clearly articulating your motivation, the talent issue, and the business benefits for you, of course, then to retain this talent and perhaps make sure that your workers are even more productive and committed. I think for a lot of companies, though, demonstrating this business case is really something that remains a challenge. And showing how these policies benefit the bottom line can be instrumental to gaining this internal buy-in. I know that the IFC has done some work on this, and I'm sure Amy can also speak to this. But Amy, now when you hear Gayatri speak, what do you think are preventing a bigger number of companies, especially in Asia, from adopting family-friendly policies? And also based on the work you lead at IFC, please tell us more about IFC and the work. What are some of the key bottlenecks that you have observed? Over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Ida. And thanks, Gayatri, for sharing the impressive set of policies and practices there at Capgemini. I think there's a number of things that prevent more businesses from taking up family-friendly policies. I think the first one might be a little lack of awareness of the business reasons to do it. So managers might not have the information systems in place that help them correlate challenges such as absenteeism or employee turnover or lack of access to the right skills with care responsibilities. Like that requires an intentional effort to really look for the business reasons for doing this kind of thing, and not just maybe reputation reasons, although those can be important as well, but real hard business reasons. In our research, for example, we see companies that have, for example, on-site childcare services at one of their facilities and don't have it at the others. And so we know the difference it makes. They've measured it. We can see a 200% difference in turnover rates, for example. And there's many other businesses as well, or business benefits as well. So I think understanding that link to the business objectives is really important. And a second one, I think, is questioning assumptions. And Laura talked about this as well a little bit in terms of the need to listen to workers. Don't assume. And in Asia Pacific, we see this assumption quite often that everyone working here has access to grandparents or other family members or affordable live-in help, and that care responsibilities are just somehow not much of a problem here. But it's not necessarily true. And the only way you know that is to really talk with workers. So survey, focus groups, ask, and then design from there. And finally, I suppose there might be some companies who are unwilling to do it because they don't know enough about how to go about adopting the right practices. So that we saw in the early survey that while a number of companies, about half, had already started doing something, most of them still felt themselves as beginners or pictured themselves as beginners of this. So the need to understand good practices, how to roll it out, because in fact, you can spend a lot of money and do something that isn't welcomed by your employees, or for whatever reason, runs into regulatory hurdles. So doing it right matters, obviously. And maybe that's one of the bottlenecks or the barriers that from keeping more companies from taking action. I mean, we've also seen other instances of bottlenecks where companies are very motivated and they start on a path to do it, and then they can't work out the regulations. For example, with creches, on-site creches or that kind of thing. They can't work out how to design the space or get the right certifications from the government. Or they know that these incentives, some kind of tax incentives might exist, but accessing them, actually claiming them, actually getting the benefits has become too challenging and they give up. So I think there's practical impediments as well, but by far and away, I think the largest impediment is just starting and connecting it to your business needs and understanding the data that will prove it. That's some of the learnings we've had here at IFC.
Thank you so much, Amy. And this makes me want to actually return back to Gayatri and ask, so what kind of engagement have you had with your workers? What is the ongoing engagement you have with your workers as part of understanding their needs?
Yeah, thank you, Adan. Thank you, Amy. So before I go to that, I just want to respond to Amy's point. It's absolutely relevant what she said in terms of, companies having the infrastructure challenges. We worked it in 3 different ways, when it came to the creche. We said where we own the infrastructure. So, it's a matter of intent, and we translated the intent into action and built the creche from scratch. Where we leased the property and we were delivering in several locations, leasing the property, we realized that we needed some kind of support for the women, especially for the women, given that today nuclear family setup is more prevalent than joint family in larger cities. And we started having conversation with the, local support system to ensure that we could at least, invest into their support system so that that those creches could be used. So it is not always an in-house creche facility. We also looked at support which is provided, close to the office, so that the commute is not too much and the child is still safe in a recognized, identified childcare. So the question is excellent, and I think Amy answered it beautifully. We went to the user. There is nothing more relevant than just going to the user and saying, what is it that you need? And a lot of our assumptions and stereotypes absolutely, become frivolous when you ask the user, what is it? So the approach is called design thinking approach. And we asked our people through surveys, conversations in person. We had several in-person connects when offices were open, I'm talking 18, 20 months ago. And ask them, how do we improve? How do we do better? And what is it that is required to ensure your continuity? And this came out really as a business case because we saw a leaking pipeline. 5 to 12 years, women with 5 to 7 years experience up to 12 found it extremely difficult and challenging to physically be present at work for about 9+ hours and do the commute, which most of our cities are famous for. So, so that was the intent. We just went back and addressed the business case of doing this, and that has translated for us, Amy and Ida.
Excellent. Thank you so much. But Amy, so let's return to the point about business benefits. Can you tell us more about what, as part of IFC's work in Asia, what have you seen as the main business benefits beyond already what Gayatri has mentioned in terms of talent and talent retention? Are there other key business benefits that would be powerful arguments for our participants and audience to hear about?
Yeah, absolutely. So at IFC, we've done some global studies on the issue of employer-supported childcare, but we've also done country-level studies. So India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Fiji, and Vietnam, we have actually looked at this issue in some degree of depth. And in Vietnam, where we most recently published a study on this, we did 6 in-depth case studies with large manufacturers where we had some really good numbers. And in the other countries, we have some good numbers here as well. But there we saw things like reduction in absenteeism. So in a large manufacturing facility, reducing unplanned absenteeism, even by a small amount, like 0.3%, was able to save $250,000 for this one manufacturer, because unplanned absenteeism, when you're looking at line manufacturing, is incredibly costly. So absenteeism, the employee turnover, I've already spoken about. That is one of those costs that I think is really obvious, maybe to the information technology and other industries where it's so clear that skills are the thing you're selling or the thing that you're relying on. But even in unskilled or less skilled workplaces, light manufacturing for export, for example, the workforce is not endlessly there for you. Labor markets in Asia are tightening. They will continue to tighten. This is good news for workers, but it might be not such good news for employers. And you have to think about what kind of value proposition you're offering employees. So this access to skills and talent, and even planning for growth. I mean, that's one area where we've been engaging companies that are planning for growth and saying, okay, my worker pool in this section of the country is so tightly competitive with all the other manufacturers. What can I do? So being an employer of choice, I think another angle we've seen important and growing importance is connecting and standing out among your buyers. So I've been talking a lot about this garment or this supply chain for manufacturers, but buyers are increasingly paying attention, and brands to gender issues in general, and outside the factory gates issues like access to care. And that's a way to stand out, not only with your buyers, but the relationships you have with local government, with local communities. And finally, and something I think we don't want to lose sight of, is we know from a lot of research in Asia, but globally, that gender diverse leadership is really important for profitability, for good risk assessment, for good, positive returns over time to businesses. And you don't get gender diverse leadership if you're losing every woman who comes into your firm as soon as they have 2 kids or 1 kid. So you have to think about retention in terms of what it means for your C-suite in 10 years, and providing family-friendly practices is just part of it. So this is some of the stuff that we've documented in the studies that I've mentioned and in the case studies and with the actual clients we work with here at IFC.
Thanks so much, Amy. I think those are really powerful arguments and definitely presents the business case. And Gayatri, now Amy just spoke quite a bit around the issue of gender diversity and inclusion, and your role in Capgemini is as the lead on diversity and inclusion. And where do you see the overlap between your work on family-friendly policies and diversity and inclusion? If you want to speak a bit more to that as well, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. So Ida, let me just reflect. Amy covered so beautifully many of the points on the business case and the intent. I just have one more point to add to that. Let's not forget the intersectionalities when it comes to gender diversity, right? When you look at diversity dimensions, there are so many intersectionalities. We shouldn't forget about a single parent bringing up children, LGBTQAI parents, children. Children with special needs, children with autism. So I think when we talk from a talent perspective in an organization, we have to look beyond just the immediate revenues, then we're very stilted in our thinking, and we have to look much broader and go with our vision. So it's extremely important for us to look at breaking gender stereotypes and addressing those myths. So I would say intersectionality is a key point when we talk gender equality. Having said that, to address your question, honestly, that's maybe a little personal story. I moved various roles. I've been in Capgemini for about a dozen years now, and I've had the privilege of having different roles. When I was offered this role and I was asked to lead it, it was pretty much, not so defined as it is. I'm talking 7 years ago. And today, for me, it's a vision larger than my role. And I think when more individuals like us join this journey, we not only change the conversation amongst corporates, we also influence policing at a government level. And that's extremely important because we bring in table to the government those changes which are so relevant and contextual to drive inclusion. And I guess, during COVID times and this Black Swan event, it's even more contextual item.
Thank you so much. And Gayatri, I'll come back to the role of government, but I just want to follow up on some of what I'm hearing from the companies that we're talking to, which is it seems overwhelming to start on this journey. And Capgemini obviously presents an extremely successful family-friendly policy story. But what advice would you give to companies who are just considering introducing family-friendly policies, but don't know yet where to start, who may not have a function on diversity and inclusion and a big vision? How do they make the case internally? How do they get started with the nuts and bolts on this work?
Very, very, very little steps and very honest, straightforward steps, Ida. I think there's a slide Laura had put up, which was absolutely brilliant. I hope more corporates get access to that slide where she addresses how we could go about it. It's about having those conversations and have honest conversations with your employees. Speak across levels. And family is not exclusive, right? It's a family, and the importance of family is inclusive for all of us. It's not a conversation that you can just have with one type of stakeholder. Oh, we don't speak to clients, we only speak to employees. We can't speak to our suppliers, we can't speak to procurement. How unfortunate then, right? So I think when we can reflect our true state of being and look forward to a better state of being, we're all in it together. And it's not about the monetary. Of course, there is a monetary commitment, but over and above that, it's the leadership commitment. Then we translate intent, and put the money where we need to.
Thanks for that. Amy, I want to turn to you and I want to change direction a little. We have discussed all the possibilities in this space, but of course there remains many obstacles still. And in Asia particularly, but also in many other countries and workplaces in the world, we see such inequities in terms of access. And while full-time employees might receive benefits that contract workers and formal workers can only dream of, what is it that companies can do to promote family-friendly policies in their supply chains and reach those workers who often need the support the very most?
No, thanks for bringing our attention to that issue, actually, Ida. And I'm also really appreciating, Gayatri, for your such expansive and inclusive approach and reminding us of the intersectionalities, because it's critical. And economic divisions is part of that intersection as well, that makes some of these barriers prohibitive for people to access good jobs and certainly good childcare. We are focused on this here at IFC in a few ways. I mean, our job as the International Finance Corporation fundamentally is to create jobs, formal jobs, better jobs than they had before by investing directly into companies in emerging markets, either debt or equity. And we see then for us to really influence the base of the pyramid and get out and reach as many people who need it the most, it is through supply chains. So one of the things we're working with, we work with the large manufacturing supply chains on this question, and we've seen buyers and we've worked with brands on how they can support initiatives as pilots, if nothing else. And we're working with a brand right now that is looking at directly supporting community-based childcare in Cambodia, for example. And eventually the expectation is, and we'll measure this really closely, is that the factories take over paying, but they're going to put their money where their mouth is and say, let's try this here first. There's other examples. Through IFC, we have a trade finance program that actually gives preferential pricing to suppliers. So this is often, apparel suppliers, when they improve in their ratings on E&S compliance, so environment and social compliance, which can include gender, and for many buyers includes things that you do beyond compliance and efforts such as childcare or family-friendly practices. So when a buyer that we're working with actually improves the rating of their supplier, we give them a discount on their trade finance. So points off their interest rates. And so that we're trying to look for these ways of incentivizing family-friendly practices. We also fully believe in the business case, and that's part of it. And we're trying to, disseminate the findings we have there. But direct financial incentives to reach some of the lower wage workers is one way. Another thing that we're doing is looking at the business models of large-scale childcare providers. So how can we make the really good childcare that's available to urban high-income earners in Asia available to the lower-income earners? So what kind of business models would it take for a good reputation, high reputation, high-quality childcare center to set up in an industrial park? How can we work a business model that works for them? What maybe can we do with the government to look at public-private partnerships? The government of Singapore does this extremely well in maximizing access to childcare through some public funding, some private operation, for example. So we're interested in these models as well. So that's just a few ways. I mean, for us, as IFC, it's a bit harder to reach into the informal sector directly, but through supply chains, through working with the government on public-private models, and for looking at business models that can reach more informal sector workers. I think that's where our focus has been on this very important question of access and equity.
Thank you so much. And obviously so much more work needs to be done in this space, and bringing in, the public space, the social protection schemes is a fundamental part of this. So thanks for sharing what the IC is doing in this, and we'll be following you closely to learn from you, Amy. So thanks for that. But let me turn to the Q&A. We already have a number of comments and questions that have come in, and of course we'd like to cover all of them. But maybe let's start because of where we are, the state of the world on this date. We are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's continuing relentlessly. And can you just share with us briefly, both Amy and Gayatri, what momentum has been created for better family-friendly policies as part of COVID-19? Is it an opportunity, or will the issues of companies having to cut down because of the financial crisis actually have implications for how we can implement family-friendly policies? Maybe I'll start with you, Gayatri.
So I think that's a very good question. And I think COVID-19 for across the globe is a wake-up call to humanity, really. I mean, in all these challenges, we need to see opportunities, and that's the only way we need to move forward. What we did for our employees, and Amy touched upon the diversity when it comes to economic strata. We know that we are conscious of the fact that our talent is from extremely different economic strata. So what we did was to make sure that a benevolent fund, a corpus, was available to provide the assistance required for employees during these financial duress. We partnered with a leading home care we're still partnering with them, leading medical service provider, and complementary remote support is provided. It's a care program for not just the employee, but the family which gets affected by COVID. We include IDP hospitalization through our group insurance, voluntary parent policies. We subsidized it by 25%. Of course, we enabled work from home. We enabled work from home in 1 week, over the weekend with 1 week. And work from home jumped from a 12% utilization to 95% or over in that just 1 week. And, enabling is not just about infrastructure, it's also about mindset. we launched happiness and well-being because we wanted our stakeholders to understand that the me part is a much smaller perspective. It's the we part which is very important. So for us, a holistic perspective to understanding happiness and supporting our community became absolutely critical, and it still is. And of course, several guided meditation sessions, yoga. Beyond that, our support to community, we set up hospital beds, supported them in key locations, PPE kits in cities that we are present in, and several steps to ensure a larger intent than just your own employees.
Thanks so much, Gayatri. Amy, do you want to add a few comments to that in terms of the either opportunities or challenges created by pandemic?
Yeah, I think there's been such a diverse experience of countries across Asia with the pandemic and with managing the pandemic. I think it's very hard to paint a single picture there. But one that has been quite common is the one Gayatri mentioned, which is just experience of companies working from home and of employees working from home. You can do it. There's very little excuse to stop working this way or allowing it in certain cases when it's safe for everyone to go back to the office. I mean, you've no excuse. We could do it. We made the transition in many, many cases, not all. So I think that is a permanent change in the way we work. And that could be very good for flexibility. The open question, I think, is are governments responding with a priority to opening schools and to ensuring good childcare support? And that is an open question. And I think it was a message from the pandemic, and one that hopefully will lead to the right policy outcomes. Very much too soon to tell on that one.
Thank you for that. And exactly, that's another question coming in, and I think that's directly linked to what you're just mentioning there. How do companies best work with the governments and the other relevant stakeholders to address issues around unpaid care, around regulation of family-friendly policies, and particularly in context where the legal protections are limited? Amy, I'll let you respond first, and then we can.
Sure. I think government or companies engaging with governments on improving the social infrastructure, which must include childcare, as well as the health and education infrastructure that's essential for a functioning economy. I think governments or companies need to make their voices heard on this. I think there's many opportunities for partnership. A couple of the case studies that we did here in Vietnam involved companies partnering with local governments to expand kindergartens. So to expand the hours that kindergartens are available to take children, so they could work with the shifts that garment workers have, for example, but also to enhance the offerings, to buy some extra computers, to have the facilities enhanced and expanded. So I think these kinds of partnerships between large employers and governments are also very practical opportunities to move in the right direction.
Excellent, thank you. And that's a great example from Vietnam. I'm wondering, does Capgemini have a similar examples of working closely with the governments around either expanding or supporting crèche services or childcare support?
So unquestionably, we work with the government. Our commitment to CSR, I was talking to you about the hospital beds, whether it's charitable hospital or government organizations, or even with police and, authorities who are medical, who are constantly, facing the risk. I think, I believe, a country like as large as ours, the government is also focused on several things. How do we bring to the attention of the government certain key elements which will effectively drive change? And that's why we work with corporate, associations like NASSCOM, FICCI. All these associations really help us change the mindset or change the direction of policing. And I think a more recent example would be on the LGBTQAI, inclusion that the government has actively launched through a policy. So these conversations have to be ongoing. Inclusion is a journey. It's not a destination, and there's always much more to do. And this is one beautiful example. Family-friendly policies is a beautiful example of how hugely impactful it is and how positively we can ensure the next generation equality.
Excellent. Thank you. So I have, there was a number of comments coming in on childcare that I'll get back to in a second, but I did want to just raise one issue as well, which is about part of making the business case is also being able to talk about how we're measuring the success of implementing family-friendly policies. Amy, let me turn first to you. If you have some thoughts and reflections on how do we best measure the successful implementation of family-friendly policies?
Sure. I think there's three categories of things you want to measure. First are the business metrics. So this is employee turnover, speed of recruitment, absenteeism, these kinds of things. Second is through employee engagement metrics. So in your surveys, formal and informal ways that you engage with employees, measure how it's going. And third, just the uptake. Make sure you know that the things you're offering through family-friendly practices are being used, and if not, address that. So paternity leave, is that really being taken, and how much? And is it being taken by managers? So I think these three things, the business metrics, the employee engagement metrics, and the uptake metrics are just a few of the ways you can measure family-friendly practices impact.
Excellent. And Gayatri, over to you. Do you have some reflections on the measurement, or you want to tell about what Capgemini is doing?
Sure, beautifully articulated by Amy. So one of the things that we have is a periodic and completely confidential employee feedback. So this happens on an ongoing real-time basis, and employees can go in and respond. The manager would not know which employee it is, though the managers get a reporting in terms of, what are the concerns they're facing. The conversations, they're completely confidential. And this has really, really helped us, because truthfully, if there is a sense of insecurity with the employee, is the employee going to give you a true, realistic answer or assessment to what you have enabled as an organization? This has really, really helped us change the tenor. Many of the recent practices that we've built in the past 12 to 18 months has purely been an outcome of the way we've started engaging with our employees and other stakeholders. So I totally agree with what Amy just articulated.
Great. Okay, so we're starting to run out of time. We only have a few more minutes left. I did want to just also do a shout out to some of the colleagues I see in the comments field. I saw that we had colleagues from our the former CCR, which is now the Center for Child Rights in Business, who've joined us as well. The Center, which their name is now, have been instrumental in a lot of the work around implementing family-friendly policies across Asia. We work closely with them at UNICEF, also on the development of the Handbook for Business and Family-Friendly Policies. So great to see you on the line too, Malin. There's some other important comments coming in that I wanted to reference. One comment here, let me see if I can pull that up. In some societies, unfortunately, the C-suite may not have had the same experience of childcare challenges and therefore lack some empathy, shared experience to prioritize family-friendly policies in their companies. So we need more data and convincing stories to get this taken seriously. That is currently, what is currently available is not sufficient. And I think this is a really powerful comment and a point for all of us. We need to make sure that we share better these stories and case studies and business arguments so that there is no room for CEOs who do not have a shared experience in terms of the struggles of combining work and family commitments. So before I wrap up for today, I just want to ask both Amy and Gayatri if they have a final comment for our audience and for all the listeners in terms of how they get started on this journey, or and some inspirational words. Gayatri, we'll start with you.
Inspirational, I don't know the words are inspirational, but so it is up to CEO is one individual, right? I think in an organization, when you want the CEO to change his or her thinking, it's about how you bring in the value and the business benefit to the table. So your business case needs to be really customized, and it needs to truly reflect your environment. When I say environment, not just the business, but also the environment your country, your organization, your industry, and do a comparative. What really is a good thing to do is, what are your competitors doing? I mean, you get the buy-in. So I don't believe that organizations can move forward, especially during these extremely unprecedented times, if they do not incorporate and invest into family-friendly policies. The business case is so loud and clear. It's now about us going with the intent of translating this, and we absolutely must.
Thank you, Gayatri. Thanks for ending on such a high note for us. And Amy, a final comment from you or inspirational word.
Yeah. Sure, two things. One is just that unlocking the potential of your business, of course, requires unlocking the potential of your employees, and they are part of families. And realizing that and accommodating that and facilitating that relationship can only help. It can only help. The second thing is make sure you understand what those needs are, and very carefully listen to your employees about what they need, and don't build a creche that isn't going to be used or whatever. Listen to your employees. And finally, I would like to propose the radical KPI for all of this, which is how much paternity leave are your male managers taking? There's other KPIs, but I think that one is one of the central ones. So I challenge people to track it and promote it.
Thank you for that challenge. That's a great final note. So let's, we only have, we've passed already our time. So let's look at the recommended resources that are up on the screen now that was referenced throughout the session. So just wanting to make sure you've all seen that. But I also just want to thank you so much again to our speakers, to all of you participating in the event. I hope we found some inspiration today. There is always more to learn and more to do. Of course, for me, some of the highlights really includes this importance of gender-sensitive measures that do not reinforce conventional caregiving roles, the needs-based and worker-centric approach. It is easy to start an engagement with your workers. And I think Gayatri talked about that at length in terms of this human design-centered approach that got them started in Capgemini. So many more points, and I think thank you so much to Gayatri and so much to Amy for bringing it all here and for this exchange between you. And just before we close, I want to mention a few more upcoming events that we also hope that you would like to join. So the UN Global Compact is hosting another Academy Learning event on how to increase gender balance in boardrooms. That's next month on the 18th of February, and the details can be found on UN Global Compact website. And we've just confirmed the dates of the next UN Forum on Responsible Business and Human Rights for Asia Pacific, which is going to take place between the 1st and 4th of June, which is co-organized by the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights, the UNDP, UN Women, ILO, and UNICEF. And last year we had a session looking specifically at the impact of COVID-19 on workers and how family-friendly policies were one of the key mitigation measures. And this year, I'm sure we'll have many more exciting sessions, and hopefully you can join all of them. But such a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you so much, and huge thank you to UN Global Compact for organizing this Academy session. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.